You've got a closet full of survival gear right now: tactical knives with serrated edges and paracord handles, $100 flashlights, camouflage, everything. And let me tell you something with absolute certainty. 90% of that gear is going to get you killed. Not because it doesn't work, not because it's poorly made, but because the survival industry has been selling you fantasy instead of function. They've convinced you that survival is about having the most expensive gear, the coolest gadgets, the most tactical setup. And while you've been spending hundreds of dollars on equipment that looks like it belongs in a Call of Duty loadout, you've been ignoring the 8 tools that will actually keep you alive when the grid goes down and society stops pretending to function. Here's what I know. The survival industry doesn't make money by telling you to buy a $20 crowbar. They make money selling you $300 tactical entry tools with unnecessary features and marketing buzzwords. Today, I'm breaking down the 8 tools you actually need. Not the gear that looks cool on Instagram. Not the equipment that makes you feel like a Navy SEAL. The unglamorous, boring, brutally effective tools that real survivors rely on when everything else fails. These are the items that solve actual problems in actual collapse scenarios. And I'm going to tell you exactly why each one matters, how to use it, and what to avoid. If you want to be part of the 1% who survives the first month because they prepared correctly instead of expensively, hit subscribe. Drop a comment telling me which piece of tactical gear you wasted the most money on. Let's get tactical. Tool number 1, a 30-inch steel crowbar, not a tactical pry bar, not a breaching tool, a basic, heavy, unglamorous crowbar from the hardware store. And before you skip ahead thinking this is too simple, let me explain why this might be the most important tool on this entire list. A crowbar is a force multiplier. It turns your body weight into thousands of pounds of leverage. Locked door, crowbar, boarded window, crowbar. Need to move a piece of debris that weighs 3 times what you can lift? Crowbar. While everyone else is trying to kick down doors or find keys that don't exist anymore, you're through in 30 seconds. But it gets exponentially better because a crowbar is also a weapon that requires 0 training and never runs out of ammunition. You don't need to aim. You don't need to reload. You swing a 30-inch steel bar at someone's kneecap or collarbone, and the fight ends. I'm not saying that's your first choice. I'm saying when you're cornered and desperate people are trying to take your supplies, you want something that delivers decisive stopping power with simple physics. Here's the part nobody talks about. A crowbar works when you're exhausted, injured, or starving. A firearm requires fine motor skills, clear vision, steady hands. A knife requires you to get close enough to bleed. A crowbar? You just swing. Any direction. It's brutally effective precisely because it's so simple. Get a 30-inch length minimum. Anything shorter loses leverage. Steel, not aluminum. Flat prying end on one side, curved claw on the other. Should weigh between 5 and 8 pounds. You want to feel the weight. That weight is your advantage. And here's your action item. Go to a hardware store this week, buy one for $25, and practice prying open something you don't care about. Feel how much force you can generate. That's your new baseline for access. Tool number 2 will sound ridiculous until you understand its applications. Heavy-duty contractor bags, the black ones, 55-gallon capacity, 3 mil thickness minimum. You need at least 100 of them, and they need to be part of your core loadout, not an afterthought. Let me paint you a picture. The water system fails. Your bathtub holds 40 gallons if you filled it in time, but you didn't. Now you find a clean water source, maybe a stream, maybe rainwater, maybe a commercial facility that still has pressure in the pipes. You need a way to transport 50, 100, 200 gallons back to your shelter. 5-gallon buckets? You're making 40 trips. A contractor bag inside a cardboard box or rigid frame becomes a flexible water bladder that holds 11 times that amount in a single load. But water storage is just the beginning. These bags are your instant shelter material. Rig them between trees for a tarp-style shelter. Layer them for waterproofing. Fill them with leaves or clothing for insulation barriers. Use them as vapor barriers in cold weather. They're windproof, waterproof, and they weigh almost nothing. Here's what I mean. You need to move supplies without being seen. Clear plastic bags and cardboard boxes scream, "I have resources." A contractor bag could contain anything or nothing. It's visual noise in a collapse environment. You can move 60 pounds of canned goods and nobody knows if you're carrying supplies or garbage. They're also body bags, and I'm not being dramatic. If someone in your group dies, you need a sanitary way to handle remains until you can deal with them properly. Burial gets complicated in frozen ground or urban concrete. A contractor bag contains the biological hazard. That's not pleasant to think about, but this is about preparation for worst-case scenarios, not fantasy survival. Run the numbers. 100 bags costs $30. That's 30 cents per application. They take up minimal space. They don't expire, and they solve problems across every category: water, shelter, sanitation, transport, concealment. Find them at any hardware store, buy several boxes, keep them dry. Your future self will thank you for having this resource when systems collapse and improvisation becomes survival. Tool number 3 is where the survival industry really screws you over. They'll sell you a $200 tactical hydration system or cases of bottled water. Both approaches are fundamentally wrong. You need a legitimate water filtration system, not a personal straw filter, not tablets. A multi-stage gravity-fed system that can process contaminated water into safe drinking water without electricity, without replacement cartridges you can't get anymore, without anything except basic maintenance. Here's the reality. One person needs 1 gallon of water per day minimum. That's just for drinking, not cooking, not cleaning, not washing wounds, just staying hydrated. A family of 4 needs 120 gallons per month just to avoid dehydration. You going to store that much bottled water? You going to carry it when you relocate? A proper gravity filter system uses ceramic or carbon elements that can be cleaned and reused for years. You pour contaminated water in the top chamber, gravity pulls it through the filter media, and potable water collects in the bottom. No pumping, no power. No complex maintenance. It removes bacteria, protozoa, and particulate matter. It doesn't remove everything. Dissolved chemicals and heavy metals might require additional treatment, but it makes biologically contaminated water safe to drink. And here's the kicker that most people never consider. You can scale this system. 1 filter element processes about 1 gallon per hour. Add more elements in parallel, process more water. You can become the water source for your group or your neighborhood. That's not just survival. That's social capital when clean water is the most valuable commodity in existence. The physics here are simple. Gravity is free and constant. Ceramic filters can be scrubbed clean hundreds of times. Carbon can be regenerated with careful heat treatment. This is technology that works in medieval conditions because it's based on principles that don't require modern infrastructure. While everyone else is fighting over the last bottles of Dasani at the looted convenience store, you're pulling water from the creek and processing it safely. Get a system that holds at least 2 gallons in the top chamber. Steel or food-grade plastic construction. Multiple filter elements. Learn how to clean them properly. It's not complicated, but you need to practice before you're doing it by flashlight with contaminated hands. Store backup elements if you can afford them, but understand that your primary elements can last years with proper care. This is non-negotiable equipment. No water, no survival, it's that simple. Tool number 4 makes the tactical knife crowd angry every time I talk about it. You don't need a $400 survival knife with a serrated spine, a compass in the handle, and a blade profile designed by someone who's never actually used a knife for work. You need a simple, fixed blade work knife. 5 to 7 inch blade. Full tang. Plain edge. 0 gimmicks. Let me teach you something the knife marketing industry doesn't want you to know. Survival knives need to process wood, cut rope, prepare food, and maintain themselves. That's it. Those are your requirements. A straight blade does all of those tasks better than a tactical blade with saw teeth and finger grooves and a hollow handle full of matches. Here's what I mean. You're processing firewood. A plain edge blade with a flat spine can be used with a baton. You place the blade on the wood and strike the spine with another piece of wood, splitting the log cleanly. Try that with a serrated spine or a sawback blade, and you're going to destroy your knife or your baton or both. The straight edge cuts clean, maintains sharpness longer, and can be easily sharpened with a simple stone. Full tang means the blade steel extends through the entire handle. If your handle breaks, and handles break, you can still use the blade by wrapping the tang in cloth or tape. Partial tang knives with hollow handles or fancy construction fail at the weak point where the blade meets the handle, and then you've got a useless piece of metal. Plain edge over serrated every single time. Serrations are harder to sharpen. They tear instead of cut, and they create more drag when processing material. A plain edge on a quality steel can be maintained with basic tools you'll have access to even in collapse conditions. A serrated edge requires specialized equipment you won't have. The optimal design is boring. 4 to 6 ounce weight, carbon steel that holds an edge, handle material that grips when wet, a lanyard hole for retention. That's it. No hollow handles full of survival items you'll lose the first time you need to actually use the knife hard. No compasses that fail. No sawbacks that make the knife worse at its primary job. And here's your reality check. A $50 work knife from a reputable manufacturer will outlast you if you maintain it. A $400 tactical knife with 17 features is 8 times the cost for 0 additional survival value. The survival industry has convinced you that expensive equals effective. But physics doesn't care about price tags. A sharp edge, leverage, and proper technique are what matter. Everything else is marketing. Buy a Mora, an EC, a Condor, or any other reputable fixed-blade work knife. Learn to sharpen it. Practice using it for actual work. And when everyone else is realizing their tactical fantasy blade can't handle basic camp chores, you'll have a tool that works. Tool number 5 is about redundancy in your most critical survival capability. Fire. You need fire for warmth, water purification, cooking, and morale. And you need the ability to create fire even when you're wet, exhausted, and everything you own has been soaked for 3 days straight. The survival industry will sell you a single fancy lighter or a magnesium fire starter and call it good. Here's what they won't tell you. Single-point failures kill you. You need a layered fire starting system. First layer, 3 cheap BIC lighters stored in different locations. Lighters work in almost every condition. They're fast. They're reliable. 1 in your pocket, 1 in your pack, 1 in your vehicle or cache location. Second layer, ferrocerium rod. This is your 10,000 strike backup. Ferro rods work when wet. They work at altitude. They work in wind. They don't run out in any practical sense, but they require technique, dry tinder, and about 30 seconds of effort. That's 30 seconds you might not have if you're hypothermic and shaking, which is why lighters are your primary. Third layer, waterproof matches in a crush-proof container. Strike anywhere matches if you can find them, but even standard safety matches work as a tertiary backup. These are your everything else failed option. But here's where redundancy becomes a survival advantage. Fire starting ability isn't just about creating flame. It's about creating flame in the conditions where you need it most. You need prepared tinder that will catch even when natural materials are soaked. Cotton balls with petroleum jelly. Jute twine. Char cloth if you know how to make it. Birch bark. Dryer lint in a waterproof bag. These materials ignite from a spark and burn long enough to dry out small kindling. The physics here are straightforward. Heat, oxygen, and fuel. Your fire starter provides heat. The environment provides oxygen. Your prepared tinder provides the initial fuel. But if your heat source fails, or your tinder is compromised, you need backups. Most people pack one fire starting method and assume it'll work. Then they're in a situation where their hands are numb, it's raining, and that single lighter runs out of fluid or gets dropped in the river. Here's your action. Build 3 separate fire starting kits. Primary kit, 2 lighters and prepared tinder. Secondary kit, ferro rod, striker, and different tinder material. Tertiary kit, waterproof matches and backup tinder. Store them separately. Practice starting fires in wet conditions with each system. Time yourself. You should be able to get flame to fuel in under 3 minutes with any of your 3 systems, in the rain, without shelter. That's your baseline competency. The cost for this entire redundant system? Maybe $30 total. But the difference between having fire and not having fire in winter conditions is the difference between survival and hypothermia death. No single component is expensive or complicated. The value is in the system, the redundancy, the practice skill. While others are struggling with their one fancy fire starter, you've got 3 different approaches and the knowledge to use each one. Tool number 6 is so unglamorous that most survival lists don't even mention it. A manual can opener. The small folding kind. The P38 or P51 model that weighs half an ounce and costs $2. And if you think this doesn't deserve to be on this list, you've never faced a sealed can of food when you're starving and every electronic device you own is dead. Pop quiz. What happens when the power goes out and doesn't come back? Your electric can opener is a paperweight. What happens when your fancy multi-tool gets lost or damaged? That can opener attachment is gone. What happens when you find a cache of canned goods in an abandoned building, but you don't have a way to access the food inside? You waste time, energy, and tools trying to improvise. A manual can opener solves this problem for cents and ounces. It folds flat. It's virtually indestructible. It requires zero training. You could hand it to a child and they'd figure it out. And it works on any standard can, from tuna to soup to industrial-size food service containers. Here's the math. Canned food is the most calorie-dense, longest-lasting, widely available food source in collapse scenarios. Every grocery store, warehouse, restaurant, supply depot, and residential kitchen has canned goods. They're what's left when fresh food rots and packaged food gets looted. 1 pound of canned beans is roughly 450 calories. A case of canned goods can sustain you for a week. But all of that is useless if you can't access it. And here's what nobody talks about. Opening cans without a proper tool damages other equipment. Try to open a can with your survival knife, and you're dulling the blade, risking injury, and potentially destroying your primary cutting tool. Try to smash it open, and you're losing food to spillage and contamination. Plus, you're making noise that advertises your position. A $2 can opener eliminates all of these problems. Your action: buy 5 of them. 1 on your keychain, 1 in your pack, 1 in your vehicle, 1 in your home kit, 1 in your cache location. They cost less than a coffee, they weigh less than a coin, and they solve a specific critical problem that will arise repeatedly in any extended collapse scenario. This is unglamorous preparation that saves you from desperate improvisation when you're tired and hungry. Tool number 7 is something you're probably wearing wrong right now. Footwear. Not tactical boots, not hiking boots. Work boots. And before you click away thinking this is obvious, let me explain why most people's boot choices will cripple them in the first week of societal breakdown. Tactical boots are designed for military operations with vehicle transport, regular resupply, and 8-hour patrols. They're built to be light because soldiers carry heavy combat loads. They prioritize ankle support for jumping out of vehicles and navigating combat environments. What they're not designed for is walking 12 miles per day, every day, on broken concrete and debris fields, while carrying everything you own for months on end with no replacement available. Work boots are designed for construction workers, factory laborers, and industrial workers who spend 10 to 12-hour shifts on their feet, often carrying heavy loads in environments full of hazards. They have reinforced toes because dropping something heavy on your foot ends your ability to walk. They have puncture-resistant soles because stepping on a nail ends your ability to walk. They have slip-resistant treads because falling with a heavy load can injure you. They're built to be repaired and to last. Here's what I mean. You're navigating a collapsed urban environment. Broken glass, exposed rebar, nails from demolished structures, sharp edges everywhere. Hiking boots, punctured sole, probably infected foot in 3 days. Tactical boots, same problem. Work boots, reinforced sole handles it, you keep moving. Or you drop a piece of salvaged equipment on your foot. 50 pounds of steel tool lands on your toes. Lightweight tactical boots, crushed toes, mobility compromised. Now you're a liability to your group. Work boots? The steel or composite toe cap distributes the impact. You've got a bruise maybe, but you can still walk. But it gets exponentially better because work boots are designed to be maintained and repaired. Full-grain leather can be treated and waterproofed. Welt construction means the sole can be replaced. Simple laces that can be replaced with paracord if needed. No complex quick lace systems. No proprietary components. These are boots you can maintain for years with basic supplies. And here's the part that separates thinking from action. Your feet are your primary transportation. If your feet fail, everything fails. You can't scout. You can't scavenge. You can't relocate when danger arrives. You become stationary in a dynamic threat environment. Most people spend hundreds on fancy gear and $50 on their footwear. That's backwards. Your feet are infrastructure. Get boots that fit properly with thick socks. Real leather, not synthetic. Steel or composite toe protection. Slip-resistant sole with aggressive tread. Waterproofing treatment. At least 8 inches of height for ankle support and debris protection. Break them in before you need them. Wear them for weeks, not days. Learn basic boot maintenance, leather treatment, lace replacement, sole care. And accept that quality work boots cost more upfront but last longer and keep you mobile when movement is survival. Tool number 8 is where we enter legally complex territory, but ignoring this reality doesn't make it go away. Antibiotics. Real antibiotics. Not first aid supplies. And before the comments explode, I'm not telling you to stockpile prescription medications illegally. I'm telling you that in a true collapse scenario, bacterial infections kill more people than violence, and a basic understanding of antibiotic therapy is knowledge you need. Here's what they don't teach you in survival courses. A cut that gets infected in normal circumstances is treated with topical antibiotics and oral medications if it progresses. In a collapse scenario, that same infected cut becomes systemic, becomes sepsis, becomes death in a matter of days. There are no emergency rooms, no walk-in clinics, no doctor's appointments. You're treating bacterial infections with whatever resources you have, and if you don't have antibiotics, you're watching people die from treatable conditions. The pharmaceutical industry and medical establishment don't want you to know this, but most common antibiotics are the same drugs used in veterinary applications. Fish antibiotics, bird antibiotics. They're the same chemical compounds in the same dosages. They're sold without prescription because they're marketed for animal use. They're manufactured in the same facilities under the same quality standards. The difference is regulatory classification, not efficacy. Now I'm going to say this explicitly. I'm not a doctor. This is not medical advice. I'm describing a preparation strategy that exists in a gray area between legal over-the-counter access and prescription requirements. If you choose to acquire and store veterinary antibiotics for emergency preparedness, you need to educate yourself thoroughly on proper use, dosages, drug interactions, and risks. You need to understand that antibiotics can be dangerous if used incorrectly. But here's the trade-off. In a complete collapse, no access to medical care, no functioning pharmaceutical supply chain, watching someone die from an infected wound or bacterial pneumonia, the calculation changes. The risk of incorrect antibiotic use becomes smaller than the certainty of death from untreated bacterial infection. If you're going to prepare in this direction, you need several broad-spectrum antibiotics that cover different bacterial families: amoxicillin, doxycycline, ciprofloxacin, metronidazole. You need reference materials that explain which antibiotic treats which infections. You need to understand proper dosing, treatment duration, and recognition of allergic reactions or treatment failure. This isn't casual knowledge. This is life and death decision-making with real consequences. And here's the dark truth. Even with antibiotics, even with knowledge, you're going to lose people to infections in a collapse scenario. Modern medicine works because of integrated systems: diagnostics, pharmacy, specialists, imaging, monitoring. You're going to be operating with incomplete information, limited supplies, and zero margin for error. Having antibiotics doesn't make you a doctor. It gives you one more tool for one category of problems. It doesn't guarantee success. Your ethical action here: educate yourself first. Research veterinary antibiotics, their human equivalents, and proper protocols. Understand storage requirements. Most antibiotics need cool, dry, dark conditions and have expiration dates. Learn to recognize different types of infections and which antibiotics are appropriate. And accept that this preparation puts you in a position of responsibility. If you have antibiotics and others don't, you'll face decisions about who receives treatment. There's no right answer, just trade-offs and consequences. This tool is controversial because it challenges the medical establishment's control over access to life-saving medications. But in true collapse, that establishment doesn't exist. You're operating in conditions where knowledge and resources create capability. Most people won't prepare in this direction because it's legally ambiguous and emotionally difficult. That's your choice to make. Now let's talk about what I didn't include on this list. No firearms, even though they're everywhere in survival content. Not because they're not useful. Because if you need me to tell you that force capability matters in collapse scenarios, you're not ready for that conversation. If you understand it, you've already made your decisions. If you don't understand it, a YouTube video isn't going to prepare you for the reality of using lethal force. No solar panels or generators. Because maintaining electrical systems in collapse conditions requires supply chains that don't exist. You need solutions that work without infrastructure, not solutions that try to recreate infrastructure. No communication equipment. Because who are you going to call? If your group needs radios, you know it. If you don't know it, you don't need them badly enough to make this list. No fancy shelter systems. Because the tools I've already given you, contractor bags, work boots, fire-starting redundancy, let you build shelter from salvaged materials in any environment. Purpose-built shelter gear is weight and expense you're better off spending elsewhere. What you've got now is a loadout focused on 3 principles: force multiplication, redundancy, and unglamorous functionality. Each tool solves multiple problems. Each tool works when systems fail. Each tool can be maintained or improvised around with basic skills. Together, they address the actual survival challenges you'll face in the first weeks and months of societal collapse. The survival industry doesn't want you to know this loadout because there's no profit in it. 8 tools, maybe $300 total. Some of them cost less than lunch, but they work when expensive gear fails because they're based on physics, not marketing. Here's your final choice. You can close this video and go back to believing that survival is about having the most tactical gear and the coolest loadout. Or you can open a new tab right now and start acquiring the 8 tools on this list. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today. Because every day you wait is another day you're unprepared when the systems we depend on stop pretending to work. Map the hardware stores in your area. Identify veterinary supply sources. Find work boot retailers. Note locations where you can get water filtration systems. Visit them. Handle the equipment. Buy it. Store it properly. Practice using it. These aren't theoretical concepts. These are physical tools that need to be in your possession, not on a wish list. And here's what separates the 1% who think about survival from the 0.1% who actually prepare. The thinking people watch this video and agree with the logic. The prepared people have half these items already, and they're taking notes on what they're missing. Which one are you? 99% won't do this. They'll watch, they'll agree, and they'll move on to the next video. They'll keep buying tactical gear that looks cool but doesn't solve problems. They'll keep trusting that systems will work, even though every indicator says otherwise. And when collapse comes, whether it's localized disaster, economic breakdown, or infrastructure failure, they'll be among the unprepared majority trying to figure out basics while you're already 3 steps ahead. Subscribe if you're part of the 0.1% who actually acts on this knowledge. Drop a comment telling me which of these 8 tools you already have and which one you're acquiring first. Let's get tactical. Class dismissed.